What political demand is so extreme that Congress would risk nearly, $1 billion every single week in economic damage just to block a funding bill?
Welcome to the deep dive. Yeah, today we're looking into the really brutal, high-stakes political game behind the current lapse in federal funding. The sources we've dug into, they map out a pretty clear strategic standoff over these huge new spending demands. Republicans have even branded it, the Schumer Shutdown.
Okay, so let's set the scene a bit. Federal funding has basically run out. The House of Representatives, they passed a measure, a clean continuing resolution, or CR. That's just a short-term bill, right?
Right.
Keep the government running at current levels.
Exactly. And that word clean, that's the absolute core of the conflict here. Republicans are saying pretty forcefully that they will not be extorted by Senate Democrats.
Right.
And the reason this matters, according to our sources, is that this House bill, it's almost identical to measures Democrats themselves voted for 13 separate times under the last administration.
Wow, 13 times.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating detail. Why is that number 13 such a big deal in this fight?
Well, it's all about leverage, isn't it? And consistency. Or maybe the lack of it. Republicans are pointing straight at that, saying, look, the only thing that's really changed is who's sitting in the White House. So they're arguing this obstruction. It's purely political. It's designed, they say, to force this massive kind of unrelated list of policy demands into the funding bill. They're calling it a $1.5 trillion radical left wish list.
So this isn't just a fight over spending levels anymore.
Not at all. It's about using the threat of, frankly, financial chaos to push through really big permanent policy changes. That's the accusation.
All right, let's unpack this $1.5 trillion wish list then.
Yeah.
What exactly are these non-negotiable items Democrats are demanding, the things Republicans are calling extortion and refusing to pay for?
Yeah, the demands really seem to focus on dramatically expanding entitlement programs and subsidies way beyond what they were originally set up for. There are two items in particular that really dominate the source material, both in terms of cost and, well, controversy.
Okay, give us the specifics, especially the costs involved.
So the first really big one is making the expanded Obamacare premium subsidies permanent. Now, it's crucial to remember these were brought in initially as temporary emergency measures during the COVID era.
Right, temporary relief.
Exactly. But making them permanent, that's estimated to cost around $400 billion over the next 10 years.
Okay, $400 billion. That is a huge price tag. But here's where it gets, I think, really interesting for anyone listening who actually benefits from this permanent extension. Is it just low-income folks?
Well, that's the thing. The way the subsidies are structured, they're not exclusively targeted at, the most vulnerable populations. The sources we looked at give some pretty specific examples of who qualifies for these taxpayer-funded subsidies.
Who?
Get this. A family of 4 in Arizona making $600,000 a year. Or, say, a married couple in West Virginia earning $580,000. Even a single person in Vermont making $180,000. All of those examples, they qualify.
Hold on. Subsidizing healthcare for families making up to $600,000. That detail alone kind of forces you to rethink who the typical recipient of this program really is, doesn't it?
It really does. And the Republican argument, as it's laid out in the sources, is that this basically bribes higher income Americans, makes them buy expensive Obamacare plans by hiding the real price tag with taxpayer money.
So they see it as fiscally irresponsible.
Massively irresponsible, disguised as pandemic relief that just never ended. That's the viewpoint.
Okay. And what's the second huge expensive demand that's tied to keeping the government doors open?
That would be restoring taxpayer-funded healthcare benefits for illegal aliens. We're talking access to both Medicaid and Obamacare tax credits here.
And the scale of that?
Staggering, potentially. Organizations cited estimate there are over 18 million illegal aliens currently in the U.S. Now, providing comprehensive health care to even a portion of that number could easily top $100 billion per year.
$100 billion annually. Just to put that in perspective for everyone listening, $100 billion a year is roughly the entire budget of the Department of Commerce. That's a massive financial commitment being tacked onto a short-term funding bill.
Yeah. And Republicans argue the total hit over a decade could approach $200 billion. Many economic analysts cited in the sources are warning this is just, a recipe for huge long-term debt issues. Fiscal insolvency, some say.
So if these demands are so controversial, so expensive, there must be a really strong political reason for the Democrats to be so rigid, right? What's driving this strategy of using the shutdown as leverage?
The sources we read suggest it's maybe less about finding a compromise and more about internal party politics, galvanizing the base.
How so?
Well, the progressive wing of the party is described as being desperate for the leadership to, quote, do something, anything, that looks like standing up to Trump and the Republicans. They want a fight. They demand, resistance.
So the political win of just being seen fighting is perhaps more valuable right now than actually compromising to fund the government.
That seems to be the calculation presented in the material, and there's another layer to protecting the leadership.
Okay.
Yeah. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is reportedly worried about a primary challenge from the far left. So, by championing these very progressive demands, like the funding for illegal immigrant health care, the thinking is he shores up his own political standing, even if the cost is a painful shutdown for everyone else.
So while the Democrats are focused on these policy demands, partly to appease their base, the administration isn't just sitting back and waiting, are they? They seem to be treating the shutdown as a strategic opening for their own goals. What does this dismantlement agenda look like? The one led by OMB Director Russell Vought.
Right. This is where you see the kind of long-term strategic play against the federal bureaucracy itself becoming really clear. The Trump administration is using this funding gap as leverage to push for deep structural changes, dismantling what they see as the inefficient or ideologically captured deep state.
What specific things are Vought and the OMB doing right now during the shutdown to make that happen?
While they're strategically targeting programs they consider woke or linked to climate alarmism, as they put it.
Sure.
For instance, they've paused $18 billion for two huge New York City infrastructure projects, the Hudson River Tunnel and the Second Avenue subway.
And the justification.
They explicitly cited wanting to ensure funding is not flowing based on unconstitutional DEI principles. They also completely terminated $7.5 billion meant for 223 green energy projects across 16 states. They branded that funding part of the Green New Scam.
Yeah, that's a pretty bold use of executive power during a funding lapse. But the strategy goes deeper than just stopping projects, doesn't it? It hits the workforce, too.
Oh, absolutely. The administration is using the uncertainty, the chaos of the shutdown to carry out mass reductions in force. RIFs, they're called. Basically large-scale layoffs across federal agencies.
How many people are we talking about?
Vought's own estimates, mentioned in the sources, suggest the administration wants to lay off north of 10,000 federal workers.
10,000. And the goal behind, I think the source used the word traumatizing this workforce. What's the end game there?
Yeah, the stated goal, according to the material, is pretty cynical. They want bureaucrats to be traumatically affected. The idea is to permanently break down the perceived deep state by just shattering morale and any institutional resistance.
And we're also seeing this direct challenge to Congress's basic authority, the power over the money, the power of the purse. What's this pocket rescission thing? Why is it so legally iffy?
So pocket rescission, it's a form of impoundment. Basically, Director Vought is trying to test the absolute limits of presidential power here. He's unilaterally holding back funds that Congress already approved.
But isn't that illegal? I thought Congress stopped presidents from doing that decades ago.
That's what most legal scholars say, yes. Impoundment power was largely removed by Congress. But by holding these funds and then just letting the fiscal year end without spending them, he effectively makes sure the targeted agencies just run out of money anyway. It's a direct play to take away Congress's power to decide where federal money goes.
Okay, so we have these two really aggressive strategies colliding. Policy demands meeting structural dismantlement. But regardless of who you think is right in this political fight, the shutdown itself, it has immediate, real, damaging effects on ordinary people, right? What groups are really feeling the pain from the Democrats' refusal, as Republicans put it, to pass the clean funding bill?
Yeah, the most immediate hit is on essential personnel, people forced to work without getting paid. We're talking active duty military personnel, Border Patrol agents, FBI agents, TSA officers.
We rely on every day.
Absolutely. And the sources really stress how precarious their finances often are. Statistics show that 1 in 3 military families has less than $3,000 in savings. So for them, a missed paycheck isn't just an inconvenience, it's an immediate crisis. Life-threatening, potentially. Law enforcement groups like NEPIO and the FOP are warning this puts officers' lives on the line without pay.
And beyond federal workers, it's the most vulnerable citizens who are also at severe risk because funding just stops.
Tragically, yes. The Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, WIC, is apparently at immediate risk, like running out of money in a matter of days.
Wow.
This program gives critical food access to millions of low-income mothers and kids. The cutoff is right around the corner.
What about our veterans? How are they affected?
They're getting hit hard, too. Critical services like suicide prevention grants, mental health programs, help for homeless veterans, all jeopardized. And basic things like VA regional offices, the GI Bill hotline, they're closed. It disrupts essential support for people who've served the country.
And the broader economic cost
No.
to the public. We mentioned billions earlier.
It's huge. The shutdown is costing the travel economy alone an estimated $1 billion every single week, just from disruptions and delays. And then there's the National Flood Insurance Program, the NFIP. Its authority has lapsed.
Why does the NFIP lapsing matter so much to, say, an average homeowner trying to buy or sell?
Because in many areas, you have to have flood insurance to get a mortgage. It's mandatory. So when the NFIP authority lapses, it means something like 1,300 property sales just can't close every day.
So even if you found a buyer for your house today,
the deal might fall through because the required flood insurance suddenly isn't available. The estimates suggest over 250,000 households could lose their coverage just this month because the government hasn't passed a simple, clean funding measure.
So wrapping this up, what does it all mean? We've got this clear calculation, it seems. One side is using the financial pain, the personal hardship of a shutdown, to try and force through $1.5 trillion in policy changes. The other side is using the shutdown itself as a chance for deep structural government changes, dismantling agencies.
Yeah, the fundamental clash laid out in the sources is between what Republicans frame as fiscal discipline, protecting taxpayers, protecting the budget process, and what looks like pretty cynical political gambling by Democrats. The bet, according to these sources, is that the economic pain, the suffering caused by their obstruction, will end up hurting the party in power politically, that it'll lead to wins for them down the road.
That's a really harsh political bet to make, involving real people's lives and livelihoods.
It is. And this whole situation, it raises a really important question for you, the listener, to think about. Some analysts mentioned in our sources actually suggest that Democrats perhaps should let certain cuts, like maybe to those ACA subsidies, go through.
Why would they suggest that?
Because, the argument goes, the resulting high healthcare costs would hit Republican voters in red and rural areas the hardest, which in turn might force those voters to turn against the GOP. So, is doing the right thing, like protecting people from immediate harm, sometimes seen by political strategists as actually being a strategic mistake?
Right.
Because it insulates the other side's voters from the consequences of their own party's policies.
A conflict between principle and political calculation.
Exactly. That tension, that conflict between maybe moral principle and just naked political calculus, that seems to be what's defining governance, or maybe the lack of it, in Washington today. It's definitely something worth considering.